welcome everyone to another chapter of Black Knowledge Matters. We're Wose community, and every Wednesday we like to share the great things that African Americans and African people are doing around the world, be it historical or be it current event. And we're glad that everyone can join us. And today we're welcoming Dr. James Anyike, and he's going to talk to us on the subject African American holidays. So let's welcome brother Dr. James Anyike. Thank you, brother. Please go ahead.
Let me again thank you again for the opportunity to share this space, this opportunity with you all. I don't take it lightly anytime we get an opportunity to share, especially to go deep into the well of the work that I've done, which is African American Holidays, the earliest book I wrote, which I wrote at the end of, between 1988 to 1990. And it's been out for many years, and it has really had an impact, I think, on the community. And hopefully with what I share this evening, you'll understand why this book has had such a profound impact. So this is the third edition. You may have seen other editions, but we did do some revisions on it in the last couple of years. So this is what this one is. And Brother Hotep, you mentioned that you might have a copy. I wouldn't be surprised. A lot of people have this book all over the country and are sharing it. I also want to mention these other books right now before we get into the body of the message, so that we can, kind of get this commercial part of it out of the way, if you don't mind me calling it that. But this is another book I wrote. The one I wrote after African American Holidays is this one, Historical Christianity, African-Centered. And in this book, I show how the people of the Bible are Black folk, that Christianity was institutionalized in Africa. It was there that the first Christian church building was built, Christian monasticism started, Christian education started. First monks of Christianity were Africans, and the first nuns. The first known church building for the purpose of Christianity was built in Egypt. And there's so many other firsts. The first school of great learning, the catechetical school, or what is also called the, I can't think of the other name at the moment, but they're the greatest schools of Christian learning were there in Africa, in North Africa. And so that's what I deal with in this book. And then most recently, I have 3 books I want to mention out of a total of 7. And let me just mention actually 2 of them, because this is what I'm really focusing on in this stage of my life. And it includes this theme of African American holidays and the purpose of that. When it was written nearly 30 years ago. So this one is called The Faith of Love. And in this book, I'm giving historical and biblical evidence to this process, or this thing called love. I call it systematic agapism. And that means Black love in a special context. And hopefully before we finish, I'll share what I mean by systematic agapism. But this book gives the biblical and historical foundation for how Black folk ought to love each other. And this one, which is called Black Love, gives some cultural, social, and I think more relevant and practical aspects as to how we have to affect a new level of love and appointment and a commitment to love than what we've been exhibiting, because we are in trouble. And I believe love truly is the answer. So those are the books. And if anybody's interested in that, you can either Google my name or go to Popular Truth Publishing. Google that, Popular Truth Publishing, and you'll find the website and you can get those books. Let me get right into this issue of African American holidays. It was in 1988 that it occurred to me, after going through Thanksgiving holiday and going through Christmas holiday and observing how we have these uniform ways that we celebrate the holidays, across the country. When it's Thanksgiving, a turkey gonna get slaughtered, right? And there's gonna be a big feast. And the family will gather together, and there's certain things that we do in a certain language that comes with that holiday. And similarly on Christmas, we know that there's gonna be a Christmas tree, and some folk are gonna, put up images of Santa Claus. and there's so many other images and practices that come with Christmas. We similarly, we all know what they are. But when it came to our holidays, I didn't see that same level of uniform approach and understanding of how to celebrate our holidays. I knew that Martin Luther King's Day was coming, but we didn't have a uniform way of celebrating it around the country. The same for Black History Month. And so in this book of African American holidays, we cover several celebrations. We cover Martin Luther King's Day. We cover Black History Month. We cover Juneteenth, Malcolm X's birthday, African Liberation Day. We also talk about the ways in which African people celebrated while in enslavement. And there's some things like Junkanoo and some other things that
Junkanoo. Now, most people don't know about Junkanoo. Okay. That's all right. You piqued my interest. That's Junkanoo. That's okay. You get everybody get ready for that one, because that's an island one. That's a good one. Yeah.
Absolutely. And you'll be amazed at the African context from which it comes from. A lot of people don't know about. And so we also celebrate the Day of Atonement with the Million Man March. There was and what I tried to do is find those celebrations that were observed around the country that already had some roots in different parts of the country, and you know, ones that we can either see that they were already ways to celebrate them, or give the descriptions of how they can be celebrated. And already with the Million Man March, Minister Louis Farrakhan outlined specific things that he encouraged that we do.
Now that's October 19th. Is that the date?
I believe it is. That might be right. I'm not looking at the date.
Okay.
Now, that sounds right.
Okay.
Yeah, and of course we have Umoja Karama, the celebration of family unity and family strength, started by Dr. Edward Sims in 1971. And of course we have Kwanzaa. And so with all these holidays, what we did was we gave the historical foundation for those celebrations, how they came to be, and then what to do on those days. And that was one of the things that made this book, which was published in 1990, a first, because nobody else had done that. And even till this very day, this book still sells well, because it still provides a very practical approach to our celebrations. It gives a lot of good historical information, but not in a long, drawn out way, to the point that some folk don't want to know all the details. They want to know the main details. And so,
Dr. Anyike, here in Northern California, there's I think one of the oldest Black bookstores. It's called Marcus Bookstore. Yeah. There was one in San Francisco and one in Oakland. And your book is featured there. And then in Sacramento, there's a bookstore called Underground Books, and it's there as well. So
I don't think I ever visited Underground Book. I did see a really good documentary on it, and I hate that I didn't make it there. But yeah, I was. And one of the good things about the time that this book came out was that there were so many independent Black bookstores.
Yes.
Have as many as we did back then, and there were some wonderful distributors too. Some of them still exist: Lucina and Red Sea Press and A&B Books, and there's several others that are still doing.
How about Hakeem Madabuti's press? Is it Third World Press? Yeah.
Haki is still doing wonderful things, publishing wonderful work, and doing some other things in education and so forth. And yeah, Elder is doing great things in the Chicago area. Yeah.
I'm gonna stop interrupting you. I'm sorry.
No, that's all right, bro. We good. So with African American holidays, my initial thought, as I said, was just to help develop some systems, some things that we can do in uniformity as we observe these holidays around the country. And actually, we ended up with more than I thought. I found that, and this is only by the testimonies I've heard through the years about the book, that folk found these holidays, many of them for the first time. Many of them never heard of Umoja Karama, and never heard of African Liberation Day, and certainly never heard of Juneteenth. And so to have more celebrations, that's the term they would usually use. Man, we got more celebrations than I thought, more than just Kwanzaa or more than just Martin Luther King's day. And so when we look at each holiday, and certainly when you go across the span of the African community in America, you'll find that some holidays are well received by some folk and some are not necessarily well received. There are actually some folk who don't feel too comfortable with Minister Farrakhan and don't feel, so they won't celebrate the Day of Atonement. There's some who might not feel too comfortable with Martin Luther King, so they won't celebrate his birthday. I think you understand what I'm saying.
Oh, yes, yes, yes. But you know what? Over time, just as an example, the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King, it's more and more people celebrating it, and they've actually are connecting it with Malcolm, yes, because you can't look at one without the other. They're actually complementary. And so I mean, we've gone from parades to actually sitting down and examining what he did and his life. There's a lot of specials that come out,
right,
and with respect to him.
And it's interesting when you look at both of those men, when you see where Malcolm was at the end of his days and where Martin was at the end of his days. A lot of people want to keep Martin on, what was that, August 26, 1963.
Yeah.
At the March on Washington, declaring that I have a dream. They want to keep him asleep, but they don't want to talk about 1967 and 68, when he said that he would upset the comfort zone of everybody in America. And he was talking about mass civil disobedience, and that if his current, at that time, 1968, Poor People's Campaign was not successful, that he would step back and give his support to the Black Powerites, H. Rap Brown and Stokely Carmichael and some of the guys like that. That was what Dr. King was saying at the end of his life. And I believe that's one of the reasons, or some of the reasons why there were those who were so afraid of him, they assassinated.
Well, when you listen to Kwame Ture, he says that Martin leaves the moral issue and comes to the economic issue.
Oh, yes, absolutely.
Because the last thing that he was doing was a garbage man strike.
Yes.
And so if he got all those dollars, together, it would have been a total transformation of the society. Yeah.
And the other thing that he was doing in economics, which is just as powerful, is he began the breadbasket program. He had Reverend Jesse Jackson lead the program, and Jesse Jackson's assignment was to establish 25 strong breadbasket organizations around the country. And the purpose of these organizations would be to support and enhance Black businesses, but also to hold larger companies accountable to make sure that they would hire Black workers, that they would raise Black workers to management positions, that if they had contracts that needed to be fulfilled, they would use Black companies and all these kinds of things. These are some of the things that Dr. King had pushed for, and again had tapped Reverend Jesse Jackson Sr. to be the head of that effort. So it's interesting again to look at all of the different things that was going on in his latter days. Both Martin and Malcolm came together in terms of their thinking about the vote. Both of them were very strong about the need for Black folk to vote. And so there are some wonderful things to learn from both of them in their latter days. And when you look at these holidays, Martin Luther King's birthday and Malcolm X's birthday, which are both in the book, which are both African-American holidays, we have so much that we can learn. And again, if we do this right, we will have these key points throughout the year where we are teaching our history from one generation to the next and celebrating it in a way that challenges us to revisit our commitment to Black folk. Now, this is what I observed throughout this last Black History Month. And I'm curious to know if anybody else saw the same thing. I noticed that there were more folk using language to indicate that I don't celebrate Black History Month in February. I celebrate it 365 days a year. Couple of problems with that. One, no, you don't celebrate it 365 days a year. You might talk about it every now and then, but in terms of actually celebrating a holiday, emphasizing the key points of our history, supporting Black businesses, because Black History Month can't only be about, lauding Black figures of our past. We got to be making Black history. We got to be making it by how we learn to turn that dollar around in the Black community and look at the examples of our past. When we look at Black Wall Street, I mean, are you looking at that 365 days a year? Are you striving for it? So all of these holidays have a very practical approach to them. And if you're just talking it, then you're not doing anything. And so, yes, I do encourage us to celebrate 365 days a year, but are we being honest and sincere and practical when we say that? And there are many who say I celebrated 365 and they know they don't. They can even get through a whole month. So they certainly ain't doing 365. And that's not to be critical, that's just to help us be realistic. And hopefully in our realism, we'll understand the seriousness of our situation and put these practices into place throughout the year. There's nothing wrong with doing a summer Kwanzaa celebration, just to, again, revisit those 7 principles in the middle of the year.
Well, like at our church, we'll say community church, the Nguzo Saba is part of the rituals within our service.
Okay.
That's how you learn. That's how you would learn Umoja, Kuji Chagalia, Ujima, Ujima. If you just do it once a year, 7 days, and I, like you, I've observed the changes that people have. I've been at this for like 40 years.
Yes, sir.
And that seems like a lot when I say that, but I've been at it at least since 1980.
Okay.
And it has grown. And when I see like what you mentioned, when people are saying 365, I think what they're saying to me is, I know that it's not something that's just confined to 28 days. That our history is like okay, now this month is women's history, but we have so many contributions from sisters that need to be spoken up. And then if you have children, you need to let them know all of this.
Right.
All of the holidays that you're mentioning, and you know what? I as you're talking and you held up those other books. I do have your other book, because the cover is similar to the other books.
Right, correct.
Yeah.
May I just make
We have a question here, Dr. Anyike. Mama Afua, go ahead.
It's not really a question. It's really a thought in my mind that, there are some really good, what we call Black calendars. And the 365 days in those calendars often indicate something. Not often, they always do. They indicate something that we could celebrate. So it doesn't have to be an official holiday.
Absolutely.
But it can be something to celebrate. So 365 days still is appropriate as far as I'm concerned, because I pour a libation every day.
Yeah, there's nothing inappropriate about 365 days. In fact, in African-American holidays, I also list all of many of our major accomplishments from the beginning of the year through the end of the year. So all the specific dates are listed. I think up until 2000, last time I did it was 2019. So up until 2019, many of the major events in our history are listed in African-American holidays. And I'm hoping that what I'm saying about 365 days does not strike anybody negatively. Really what I'm saying is, I'm saying a statement of agreement that we should celebrate at 365, but don't just say it, be about it. But we can also use Black History Month as a time to highlight it, just like our birthdays. We live every day of the year, but many of us celebrate our birthday, right? And so we can celebrate our birthday, do a special emphasis on the day that we were born, and celebrate our mamas, our babas, and our mamas. Those are good things, but you keep on living and hopefully appreciating life every day of the year. This is Women's History Month. And yesterday was International Women's Day yesterday. And again, we should celebrate. We should have these points as which we, highlight certain things, but we can still celebrate them throughout the year.
Yes, and another thought I had too is that, I have a Pan-African perspective about a lot of things. And what we celebrate here in the United States and what's designated as a holiday is a small portion of all the big holidays and celebrations that exist in our diaspora and in our motherland.
Yes.
And so just a couple of days ago, there was the Independence Day for Ghana. And I went online and there was lots and lots of links, to things that were happening, speeches, their marches, their special celebrations. And, so I think as we celebrate, we can think globally as well as nationally and in our immediate diaspora. Yeah. But I really appreciate all of what you're saying.
Thank you so much. And what I'm hoping will happen, because over time we've gotten, and when I say we, I mean we as Black folk, and especially a younger generation, in a lot of ways we've gotten farther and farther away from our African selves. We don't have a sense of what's happening with African people in other parts of the world, in the diaspora in particular, or in the continent in particular. And so there's a need for reconnection, but if we can't reconnect with who we are here first, it's almost impossible to think that we would connect with what's happening in Nigeria, or what's happening in Zimbabwe, or what's happening in Ethiopia, or what's happening in Libya, especially with all of its tension. And so we feel like that's over there. But if we understand who we are as our African selves, which I think the African-American holidays help us to do, then we will be more easily connected to the continent. It would be almost impossible to not be connected to the continent when we celebrate ourselves as African people in America.
We're with you.
All right.
We're with you.
Yes.
We're with you.
Let me say a couple of more things about this book and what I've seen happen, what I hope will happen. The key thought that I want us to keep in our mind is the issue of shared values. Over the last 50 years, we have lost our sense of shared values. If you go back 50 years ago, you can see, even intergenerationally, how the young people had a sense of what their role was. They knew that they should keep a level of respect when they came in the presence of elders in terms of how they spoke. You wouldn't find young people cussing in the presence of elders the way we do now, if you go back 50 years ago. And even among the elders, there was a common understanding among the elders, whether they were in the church or in the home or in the school or in the business, wherever they were, they knew that these children, they need to have better than what we have. And we need to all support them, and we need to encourage them, and we need to lift them up. But we don't have that level of support or mentorship or encouragement like we had 50 years ago. We used to teach our young people how to be in relationship with one another, right? If the young sister was going to date, there were certain things the young brother understood he would have to deal with that parent or with that community if he was going to date that sister. And certainly if the sister needed some advice, the women of the family, of the community would encourage her and give her some instruction. And if the brother was going to try to date, there was a commitment among the men in his community to kind of give him some direction so that he would know how to properly approach a sister. And we've lost that. We've lost our sense of generational continuity. We've lost our connection to the institutions that brought us over, whether you're talking about our historically Black colleges or universities or our churches or whatever institution. Here in Indianapolis, the YMCA in the 1960s was a major gathering place of Black people for Black thought. We've lost that. We've even lost our understanding of it. And so we've lost our institutions. We've lost a great deal of our health because we've lost the sense of how to eat healthy foods. And we have lost our minds because media has warped them to the point that in the past, there was some understanding between one generation and the next, but now we've lost that understanding. Our children in our own homes are speaking languages we don't even know. And I'm not talking about foreign languages. I'm talking about the hip hop terms, or you know, the I want to say gangster culture, you know, that they see in the music, or what they may see in movies and other images or online. I mean, that's just a whole nother reality that has made us disconnected. And I'm saying that African American holidays are a way that we can assure some level of common communication throughout the year when we celebrate these holidays. And there's some other things that can happen behind that. Because if we get a good sense of what we're saying to each other, and a good sense of our expectations and our understanding of the values we share in common, then we can move together. I won't say most, maybe I'm right about that. Many of our relationships, you know, couples or married couples, have fallen apart because, again, we've lost our sense of shared values. He has one perspective, she got a whole nother perspective, and it's almost like never the two shall meet. And they get together over some things that might not necessarily be so substantive or meaningful. And then once that sense of you know, shiny thing, or what's the phrase I want to use, when the love, you know, when the emotional elements are first coming together, kind of, you know, wear down, then they're looking at each other wondering, who are you, you know? And so we got to get back to a place where we understand what our values are, who we are, what we must do. And I'm saying that celebrating African American holidays is one way, one key way. It may even become, if we are faithful to it, the major way. And I'm glad to hear you say, Brother Hotep, that at Wasay Community, you all practice these 7 principles throughout the year. What would happen, not even if all Black churches, but what would happen if at least 10% of the Black churches in America push these kinds of values, the values that we see in Kwanzaa, or the values that we see in Umoja Karamu, or the values that were taught at the Million Man March and now celebrated through the Day of Atonement. And all of these holidays, if all of our churches had an appreciation for Malcolm X, an appreciation for Martin Luther King, an appreciation for oh goodness, I can't believe I'm spacing on my brother's name, who founded African American Holidays. I mean, founded historical African American Holiday Week, Negro History Week.
Oh, Carter G. Woodson.
Carter G. Woodson, yes, Dr. Carter G. Woodson. Yeah, Dr. Carter G. Woodson, man, he did something in 19.
Well, look at Dr. Carter G. Woodson's life. He livicated his life to the knowledge of Black people. And I don't know if you're familiar with this anecdotal story, because they talked about the way he dressed. They said he wore like hayseed suits, you know, and he approached this woman one time, and he says, hey, you know, don't I know you from somewhere? You know, he really, she looked familiar, and she says, she looks at him and she says, well, yes, you should know me. You asked me to marry you 20 years ago. He was so involved in his work, you know, that like, you know, he had lost track of time. You know, he you know, because he was, and you know, a friend of mine had the 66-volume work of the Negro World that Dr. Carter G. Woodson had put out. It's not only Miseducation of the Negro, but he had like a 66-volume, you know, just compendium of those things. And you are absolutely right. You are singing my song, and that leads me to, you know, like you, I'm looking at, you know, how did we lose these values? And I see that you're approaching it with the calendar, but in your works, do you include music as part of the recognition as part of keeping our minds together?
I have not, in terms of, you know, well, let me rephrase that. When you talk about music that feeds into and encourages us in our culture, is that what you're talking about?
Yes.
Then in that case, the 2 sources of music that I have used consistently One is from Brother Steve Cobb and Kwame Steve Cobb and Sister Shaban Duka in Chicago, who did a 7 Principles CD, which is a really wonderful musical illustration of the 7 Principles. And so that's one source of music that I regularly use. Another one is from, and Steve Cobb and Shaban Duka in Chicago. And I'm hoping that all of us have that CD, but if you don't have it, Google Steve Cobb 7 Principles, and I'm sure you can get it. They'll send it to you, or you can order it online and have it downloaded into your devices. The other one is a sister named Falami, and I'm forgetting Sister Falami's married name. Her former name, I want to say, is Prescott, but I think she has a married name. Sister Falami in Atlanta, who wrote a program called Set Clay, Self-Esteem Through Culture Leads to Academic Excellence. Dr. Juwanza Kunjufu published that program and propagated it all over the country so that our children would have some sense of great expectations, and the educators that taught them would have a proper sense of expectations. Well, along with that, Sister Falami developed a body of music with it. And so that's another wonderful source for music that celebrates holidays, celebrates birthdays, and so many other things. So those are 2 key sources that I've used. The only other thing I've said about music is to raise, and I guess the proper term is a criticism, that a lot of the music that captures the minds of our children are not things that will encourage their sense of culture or self-respect for themselves, for a potential mate, for their community, for their elders. So much has been torn apart by the wrong music. And that's another concern that I've often lifted up.
Let me offer this one too. It's an album that came out. I guess you could still use that word, album. Maybe it's a CD. And it's called Celebrate Kwanzaa, and it's by a group called Blue Salim.
Okay.
Blue, and the next word is SALIM. I don't receive any residuals from this announcement, but the songs include Celebrate Kwanzaa. It has a little snippet of Dr. Malana Karinga. It has Happy Kwanzaa, which is a really upbeat song.
Yes.
Dawn of Umoja, Self-Determination, The Recipe.
Okay.
You know, it has a song called Family and Making a Change and Down Home Harvest. And, so there are 17 cuts. There's a libation statement on it. There's 17 cuts on this. It's called Celebrate Kwanzaa by Blue Salim. I'm sorry, I keep taking you off the track where you're going.
No, man, you're right on track.
Yeah.
And
Make sure I get that.
Minister Emotep, you know that we also have one. Minister, our founder, one of our co-founders, Minister Mokulisi, they have a Kwanzaa CD that we need to redistribute and put out. We have one as well that came out of Wose.
Awesome.
So yes, it's thank you, Mom and Gina. The music for me is so important because we do so much with it. And because I came up in the 60s and the 70s, it seemed like we went from being together to Black male. We had to have Black male female relation conferences, and we went from being together, and all of that kind of started with like Gloria Steinem, who you later find out is really was a CIA agent, and she helped write that book Black Macho and the Myth of the Superwoman, and then things get all I heard Bob Marley use this term, the things got all wingy wongy. People the next thing I knew, The Color Purple was coming out, and it was just one bad thing after another. And I'm glad to meet people like you that are actually encouraging the positiveness and how we relate to the different days of the year. That's would you mind go ahead.
I'm sorry, go ahead, brother.
No, you go ahead.
Thank you. I just want to mention also Sounds of Blackness. That's another
Sounds of Blackness, yes. Yes, yes,
Yeah.
indeed. And you know, even though reggae has kind of strayed from its path, if you go back and listen to Bob Marley, Steel Pulse,
Yeah.
Muta Baruka, Linton Kwesi Johnson,
Yeah.
you know, Bob's children, Ziggy and his brothers and sisters. You get a lot of positive. Luciano,
Yeah.
the reggae artist, you get a lot of positive messages coming out of that music as well.
Absolutely, absolutely. So there are rich sources, and I know even among some of our younger hip hop brothers and sisters, some of them are doing some really positive music. So I'm not as aware of it, but I do hear from time to time from my younger brothers and sisters. You know, they'll tell me about different cuts and which ones are real good and which ones are real positive. Brother Kwesi Rasuli in Gary, Indiana, has a radio show, and that's all he plays is the positive Afro-centric, you know, and culture and community affirming music that's coming from the younger generation. So there are a lot of sources out there that I don't even know about, but we need them. We need them to again move in this process of healing us in many of the ways that we're hurting.
True. Now you mentioned Junkanoo. Yes. And I have some friends from the islands. Can you go into that? Can you talk about Junkanoo?
Yes, there was a man, and let me look at the book. I'm gonna cheat because I can't remember it off the top of my head. Well, let me start of it first here in the States. There were a couple of places in the country, but specifically in Wilmington, Delaware, there was a practice that took place among the enslaved during certain holidays. And there would be a person who would dress in a very elaborate costume and would have either his face painted in a very interesting, somewhat distorted way, or have a mask on. And he would dance and gyrate and lead a procession through the city to wherever the community would be gathering for their time of festival. And they called him John Canoe. And so John Canoe was sort of I guess you can say, in some sense, a minstrel kind of figure, you know, and I really can't think of a better way to say it. And that reality was not just in Wilmington, Delaware, but it was also in the islands, you know, in Haiti, and in, I believe, even in Jamaica and other parts of the islands.
The Bahamas.
Yeah. There were those Junkanoo figures. They were not all called Junkanoo, but many of them were. But the thing that I find really interesting is they go back to, and off the top of my head, I don't want to give the wrong country out of Africa that practice comes from. And
perhaps Dahomey. I don't know. Perhaps Dahomey.
Well, let me see. Let me read it as it's written here, and that might give us some help. And let me see where to start, because I don't want to read it all to you. And what I'm trying to do is find a place where it talks about it in Africa. Let me read this paragraph here. John Canoe, or Coonering, was known to have been performed in the eastern region of North Carolina, specifically in the towns of Edenton, New Bern, Hillsborough, Wilmington, Hilton, Fayetteville, and Southport. The known variations in spelling, and then I give a number of different variations in how it's either spelled or pronounced. It was also pronounced as, or spelled cuckoo in one place, John crayfish in another place, and various forms of the word John Canoe or Junkanoo. There is little dispute that Coonering has its roots in Africa. Some believe that John Canoe to be symbolic of John Cooney, C-O-N-E-N-Y, or Cooney, the king of Axum, of the Gold Coast of Africa. He outwitted Dutch merchantmen and maintained control of Fort Brandenburg, later rechristened Cooney's Castle. According to the historical dictionary of Ghana. John Cooney lived from 1660 to 1732 and was one of the great merchants of the Gold Coast in the early 18th century, I'm sorry. From 1711 to 1724, he was commander of the Prussian fort of Gross Fredericksburg, also called Fort Brandenburg, at Pocoso or Princestown, located 27 miles southeast of Takoradi. So I think that's the key part of what I wanted to capture. And this figure of John Canoe was so impactful because, you know, just the same as the Black comedians of the last century, and really up until this time, they had a way of telling the truth or conveying messages or delivering messages that were not as received as hard as, you know, if Denmark Vesey would have given that message, or Nat Turner would have given that message. A person, you know, portrayed as doing it in comedy could say some really powerful things. So when you listen to Moms Mabley, or when you listen to Red Fox, or when you listen to some of the other comedians of the 50s and 60s and on forward, you know, Big Maybelle and so forth, in some of the ways that she interacted with Moms Mabley, you'll find some very interesting, powerful political statements being made. And so that John Canoe figure was also one who could convey some really deep truths in the songs that he was singing and the sayings that he was saying that would help motivate and bring Black unity, and a great understanding of what we got to do as a Black people, just like the old Negro spirituals, as they are called. You know, some of them had very revolutionary messages. Well, the John Canoe was sort of a revolutionary figure, certainly in America, and I would assume the truth is probably he did that in the islands also. And so at one point, and I forgot what city it was or what state it was, they literally outlawed John Canoe. Now that was in partnership or in cooperation with some Black folk who found John Canoe to be too, you know, too common and too, they considered him to be debasing of Black people. So it's an interesting history. And,
you know what's, you know, as you're talking, there was a figure like that in one of the James Bond movies.
Okay.
And I think it was when Roger Moore was playing James Bond, and I think Godfrey Holder played that role, and he had a top hat, and he had his face painted, and he was leading like a revelry at night, you know. So they kind of slid it in. But they made it ridiculous, you know. But
I'm not up on James Bond movies, but I wouldn't be surprised.
Yeah.
And as you know, and I'm sure many of you know, John Canoe, that personage still exists in many parts of many of the islands when it comes to certain festivals. There still are John Canoe festivals in the islands. And
now, what time of year? Because when I hear June Canoe, I'm thinking of the Bahamas, and it's like in June. What time period are you looking at in your book?
You know, and in the book, I don't give a specific date because I'm not aware of any in the African American context, especially during the time that we were enslaved. So I'm not aware that there was a certain day. Just the same as there are certain dates, as you know, and it's said in the islands, where everybody knew this is going to be a John Canoe festival. But I'm not aware of a specific date in North America. And I can say the similar thing about Juneteenth. You know, Juneteenth is celebrated at different dates, depending on where the Union forces were able to come in and enforce either the Emancipation Proclamation or the 13th Amendment to free up folk. You know, we've heard that story about down in Texas, where, and I hate to even tell the story, but they say the reason why they celebrated Juneteenth so late, 2 years after the Emancipation Proclamation in South Texas, was because there was a slow Negro on a mule who took so long to get down there. It took them 2 years to get the word to him that they had been set free. And I was amazed to hear that story, and I still hear it from time to time, but I think much of that mythology has been broken up. Well, the reality was that it took a American general, Union General Granger, to get down there in order to impose or support or enforce the legal emancipation or freedom of Black folk in that area. And so we had a grapevine. Black folk had a grapevine while enslaved that was very dynamic. I mean, they knew the word quicker than many of the Europeans knew the word, because they had those areas across the the various shores where news will be moved from one port to the next port by Black folk who were on these boats. And so they knew that they were free. It was just that the sheriff, the local legal forces, would not enforce the freedom. And that wasn't just true in Texas, that was true in many parts of the country. So that's why there's so many different dates for Juneteenth.
Now I have to confess, because my mother's from Texas.
Okay.
And a lot of people in California, if you go back, Black people, if you go back, a few generations, they're either from, the majority are either from Texas or Louisiana. And then you got people that are from Arkansas in California. My mother's side of the family came to California in like 43. And so I used to think, well, why would you celebrate getting told the news late? And then I got I got to thinking, I said, well, whenever I found out I was freed, I would celebrate it. I think that was a little maturity. When I was younger, I was like, why would you guys celebrate something getting the news late? And then, then you get to thinking, well, whenever I found out,
right,
that would be the time to celebrate,
Absolutely. And our ancestors celebrated their legal emancipation, like no other celebration. It was just a great time of partying. And some of those celebrations literally lasted more than 3 weeks. They just kept right on celebrating. And now we should use Juneteenth as an opportunity, certainly to celebrate those freedoms that our ancestors enjoyed, but also to have our conversations of how we can actually make that legal emancipation, in fact, emancipation, or in fact, liberation. And I think that's one of the things we've missed. I think some folk, many Black folk in America think we're free. And because they think that, they don't think there's much to fight for. Sometimes they look at Anyike, they look at me and say, man, why are you still living in the 60s? But they don't understand, they living in the 1860s and don't realize it. And so we got to keep doing what we're doing, and hopefully these celebrations will lead to those opportunities where we'll have the proper conversations that lead to real liberation. Now,
you mentioned a holiday that I was not familiar with, and it had the word Karamu in it.
Yes.
Can you go into that? Can you explain that?
Umoja Karamu was started by Reverend Dr. Edward Sims in 1971 in Philadelphia. And he started this holiday as a way to celebrate family unity and family strength. And it includes 5 different aspects or elements, if you will, to the celebration, which come along with 5 different time schemes and 5 different colors. And so it goes all the way back and looks at our African greatness, and it comes into our time of oppression and enslavement, to our time of fighting for liberation, to our time for great political advances and economic advances like Black Wall Street, and then to the future, how our future will look for Black folk. And so it looks at the family, but it also looks at the community as a family. and encourages us to have a historical sense of where we've come from so that we can understand where we have to go. So it's a full movement all the way from the past greatness to our hopeful future greatness as an African people. And it's
so now what time of year is that celebrated?
That's celebrated on November. Well, I mean, it's not a specific date. It's usually done the Sunday before Thanksgiving. So whatever
Okay.
is Thanksgiving, that's the day we'll celebrate Umoja Karamu. And if I'm trying to make sure fourth Sunday is the general Sunday, but fourth Sunday of November is the best answer. But we usually celebrate it here on the Sunday before Thanksgiving.
That's really a fascinating one. Thank you for pointing that out and sharing that. Now, with respect to Malcolm's birthday, do you have it around the same time as African Liberation Day? Sometimes people actually celebrate the two, at the same time, or maybe African Liberation Day will be the weekend after Malcolm's birthday, etc. So can you explain how you celebrate those two?
Absolutely. May 19th is Malcolm's birthday. May 25th is the day that we traditionally celebrate African Liberation Day or African Freedom Day. And of course, we know who Malcolm X is, and we know what he meant and still means to us as a people. And so the celebrating of African Liberation Day, African Freedom Day, of course, comes out of 1950 and 1960 liberation movements that took place on the continent of Africa. And as the more African countries got there, or rather gained and fought for their liberation, some worked out negotiations with their colonialist forces, but in many cases they fought to get their liberation. So they began to celebrate that around the continent on one day. And May 25th became that day that they would celebrate their African unity. And also, again, just like Juneteenth, they celebrated their different times of liberation, but they also used it as a time to reflect on what they have to do to get greater liberation. So that's still a major holiday on the continent. And so to celebrate that in partnership with Malcolm X birthday is, I believe, in order. We have done it many times also. Most times we celebrate it here at Scott Church. We also celebrate it together as opposed to one celebration apart from the other. Yes,
that's a great tradition. There's high points and low points. There was a time when African Liberation Day was really really big, and we in Oakland there was a park. It was called a Royal Park, and they would there would be hundreds or thousands of people there. Would have all this different music. Politicians would be there. That was when Representative Ron Dellums was in Congress then, and we had all kind of things going on, and then it kind of waned. So it goes, the pendulum goes up and down. Now in your African American holidays or African holidays book, do you also recognize, say, the solstices and the equinox? Do you have those in there as well?
The solstices and the equinox. I'm not familiar with that.
The spring equinox, the summer solstice.
Solstice. I thought you said soul sisters.
Oh, no, I'm sorry. Yeah, we always celebrate the soul sisters. There's no question about that. That's every day. But the solstices and the equinox, yes.
Right. No, actually, no. I mean, of course, one of the other things I do in African American holidays is I give a little small paragraph on the major European holidays and what they represent. And so in acknowledging Christmas and Easter, we mentioned the fact that these are solstice events. And that's probably, as far as I can think off the top of my head, the extent to which those times are mentioned in the book. So we have not observed that. And I know that there are a lot of people in the culture that do celebrate the changings of the movement of the heavenlies and the solstice. And so I think that's worth looking at, as far as acknowledging it as something that's meaningful to many Black folk.
Yes, yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. Now, in Dr. or Reverend Isamusa Boroshango book, he has something called the 4th of July. Mm-hmm. Do you have anything, how should we view that day, the 4th of July?
The beauty of Dr. Ishaka Musa Barashango's books was that it really helped to set the stage for what I did. Because when he dug into the heritage, the history of these holidays that were generally European holidays, came with European imagery, a lot of folk just dropped them. They just dropped those holidays. And so lo and behold, I come, just a few years behind him and come with the African-American holidays. It gave them something to pick back up and say, we can celebrate ourselves. And so when he talked about the 4th of July and his other, depictions of the European holidays, he gives some really powerful truths. That's something that we got to think about. And there was that period of time when I didn't celebrate any of the European holidays or what I perceived to be European holidays. And now I know a little bit more about the Christian nature of some of the holidays and how in some cases, there may have even been some African, impact on the holidays that we weren't aware of. Not many, but some. So yeah, I'm a strong supporter of his writings. And as I said before we got started, I was blessed to meet him by phone. We didn't meet personally, but we did talk on the phone about our respective writings. And he was very encouraging, and I certainly celebrated the things that he had written in both of his books on European holidays.
All right. It's about 5:58 now, and I've been monopolizing Dr. Anyike's time by asking him questions and interrupting him. So if you wouldn't mind, Doctor, I would like to open it up now for those of us that are here. Let's see, there's how many people? There's 20 people on this evening, and so I'm going to open it up. Would you just, I can't see everybody on the screen. If you would raise your hand on within the Zoom, and then I could recognize you, and we could proceed like that. Okay, so are there any questions that you have for Dr. Anyike? Anyone? So yes, Kalahari, you have to take yourself off mute. We're having some technical difficulties. It's not doing it. Huh? Okay, okay, when you're set, we'll come back to you. Anyone else have any questions for Dr. Anyike? Go ahead, Debbie. Go ahead.
Is Ma'afa one of the holidays that is included?
What holiday was that?
Ma'afa?
Ma'afa. There are a couple of sections where we deal with the Ma'afa, certainly in Dr. Ishaka Musa, I'm sorry, and Dr. Edward Sims' presentation of Umoja Karamu, and certainly in Kwanzaa and African Liberation Day. So in the book, the Ma'afa is mentioned several times. And a lot of people don't know about this form of dehumanization that we suffer as a people. And in a lot of ways, the Ma'afa continues in new forms. Our minds are being mutilated by some of the things that we are exposed to in society, and that's especially true for our children. And so even though we don't present the Ma'afa as a specific date of celebration, the theme of it is certainly recognized in the book several times.
In the Bay Area, we go to, there's a beach in San Francisco on the Great Highway, and it's the Sunday before Christopher Columbus, that's Muta Baruka, It's the Sunday before Christopher Columbus Day, and we recognize there's a big celebration, recognition of the Middle Passage, and it's called the Ma'afa. That's what we do here in Northern California.
That's good.
Anyone else? Anyone else?
Can you hear me?
Okay, yes, Judy, go ahead.
I think Kalahari was trying to say something perhaps.
Can you hear me?
He finally got through. Yes, go ahead, Kalahari. Go ahead. And then
About near his end of life, Dr. Martin Luther King, no one would speak to him according to Tavis Smiley's book, whose book title I don't remember.
Right.
The other thing was New Year's Day. Does your book say anything about New Year's Day?
Yeah, there's a small paragraph on it, and certainly we acknowledge the fact that this was a holiday. Well, not that, but in particular, Emancipation Day. When we talk about Juneteenth, Emancipation Day is a day that's celebrated January 1st by many folk, and it was on that eve that Frederick Douglass and many others around the country were waiting to receive word about the passing of the Emancipation Proclamation. So that's the only mention of it, other than the little small section on New Year's Day itself, but nothing else beyond that.
As you know, anybody can say anything on the air. On TikTok, this brother said that New Year's Day was the day that the slaves found out whether or not they would be sold and the family broken up. So, like I said, people say anything on the air. So, and the other thing about Christmas, Kris Kringle, according to this brother, was black. Years ago, he was black. That's where it started from. It was a black Kris Kringle. And they eventually turned him white. And he was turned white by the Salvation Army, because naturally they couldn't have a brother out there. And the last thing is Fort Harrison still there, the Home Army Dollar in Naptown?
Yeah, Fort Harrison is still here. To what degree it's used for the purposes it was used in the past, I don't, I'm not aware of.
Yeah, I was stationed there.
It's still here, and they have some functions, serving the interests of the military around the world. I only know that because we've had members of the church who work, some who work there now and some who worked in the past at Fort Harrison with the particular departments that are based here in America, in Indianapolis, for the country. But I wanted to go back to what you said too about Santa Claus. Of course, it's a person who is based on a man named Saint Nicholas, and Saint Nicholas was an Orthodox Christian, and when you look at images of him, he would be described as what you would call swarthy. He was dark in complexion, but to the best of my knowledge, he would probably not be considered what we would call black. He was without Western European, and if there was some African genetic connection other than that which all humanity has, because all humanity comes out of Africa. There are some Europeans that are known to be a little bit dark, even though they not be African in a more direct sense. So yeah, that's my understanding of Saint Nicholas.
Okay.
But didn't he say Christ, not Santa Claus?
Well, Christ was black too for a while, but they changed him too.
But I thought you mentioned Christ.
I did.
I
Kris Kringle.
I did mention Kris Kringle. But,
Kris.
Yes.
Yeah, but just in case you don't know, Jesus is coming black again.
Sister Judy, go ahead. Go ahead.
Yes, I just wanted to say thank you so much, Dr. Anyike, for coming and being our presenter. This is very engaging and just interesting information, and enjoyed the dialogue with you and Minister Imhotep. I've known you since I met you in Atlanta in 1999, I believe, and you were a student at ITC in Atlanta. And I just wanted to say, I know a lot of people, well, not a lot, a few people came on late, so I don't know if they're really clear on when this book really was written, when you first initially wrote the book. And also, could you tell us a little bit about your background?
Okay, and thank you again, my sister Judy, especially thank you for making this connection so that I can be with you all tonight. And certainly thank you for your friendship and encouragement through the years. And we're gonna keep right on rolling along and doing the same as we have been.
But he has a daughter that went to Tuskegee too.
Yes, yeah. I had a daughter,
all right, I knew
right.
that was coming.
Yeah, she just graduated last year. And now doing her master's program in New York. But there are a couple of things that you said there that you want me to tell you a little bit about myself. Born and raised in Chicago. And the wonderful thing about being in Chicago, I was a student at Western Illinois University in Macomb, Illinois as an undergrad. And while there, I got very involved in student movements, and we did a lot of things that impacted Black folk on the campus. And out of that, we started kind of between Western Illinois University and Illinois State University, we started a organization called the Association of Black Student Organizations. Illinois Association of Black Student Organizations, which became the largest Black student alliance in the country at that time. And I was the founder and leader of it, or one of the founders, but certainly the president of it. And because of our activities in impacting students and registering students to vote, we were registering more students than anybody in the state of Indiana, Illinois in particular, to vote. And the political, community took notice. And because of that, I was welcomed in. Leave it there, leave it there, leave it there. I was welcomed in the political community and got a lot of support from Black elected officials, both statewide and citywide, and was directly connected to some of the key Black movements in Chicago. So I had the chance to have as a mentor, Dr. Jacob Carruthers was my mentor and one of my teachers at the Center for Inner City Studies. And you look at the back of Historical Christianity African Center, he was the one who provided the cover note for Historical Christianity African Center. And there's so many others, Dr. Anderson Thompson and Dr. Conrad Worrell. And my goodness, these were key figures, in my life as I was growing up as a young person in the Black movement. So I'm thankful that I had that experience. So to me, that's my background. Born and raised in Chicago, came up in an area of Chicago called Cabrini Green and then West Inglewood. Been in the church all my life and accepted my call to ministry in '95 and went to ITC, which is, I would say, the jewel when it comes to Black theological training, which is in Atlanta, Georgia, and graduated from there in the United Methodist component, which is called Gammon Theological Seminary, and went on from there to be pastoring here in Indiana. And so this appointment that I'm in now is the longest appointment I've been in, 14 years as pastor of Scott United Methodist Church, which is a historically Black church in the Martindale-Brightwood community, Black community. And so I've done that and written books and published many other authors and so many things. Been doing a radio program for quite a few years. I was doing it when I was in Atlanta. At that time, it was called Soul Liberation Station. And I've been doing it here in Indianapolis for 6 years on the local Black radio station, WTLC. I've been doing it for 6 years, Soul Liberation Radio. And now I'm at a really interesting point because I'm wrapping up my time in Indiana, moving to Mutare, Zimbabwe in August.
What?
Yeah,
What?
so I'm looking forward to the move to the continent and hopefully the rest of my life there on the continent in Mutare, and hopefully one day will teach at Africa University, which is in Mutare. That's why I chose that location, and I have assurances that I will I will have a role there at Africa University. And so I'm trying to explore what that'll look like. But yeah, I'm making the move in August, and I will be leading, doing my publishing work. I'll continue to do that. And we'll also continue to lift up and formalize this new institute that I've formed called Agape United Institute. And so that will be all about teaching us how to do Black love, how to love Black people, how to love ourselves. And there's so much more I can say about that, but we'll be way out of time if I keep going. So I'll stop right there.
That's
brother,
fantastic.
Zimbabwe, yes.
How far would you be from Harare?
It would be, well, it's about a 3-hour drive. Just about a 3-hour drive. It's I want to say it's like 140 miles, but it takes about 3 hours to get there. And let me say this other thing, because I'm really excited about this. A few years ago, I started on an Afro-centric Bible. It's more or less an Afro-centric poetic Bible. And so I've been doing a lot more work on that at the beginning of this year. And I'm excited about it. I'm going to publish it hopefully by the spring of next year. But I'm glad I'll be on the continent when it's finished and published. So that's another thing you can look out for, is a Bible that uses language and an Afrocentric approach that will, I believe, speak to our people in a way that can really change and transform some things, both here and on the continent.
Beautiful, beautiful.
Can you say a little bit more about why you chose Zimbabwe? You have connections there?
Yes, I do have connections. I've visited there twice, and both times is somewhat connected to the church. The first time I went, it was with to attend the World Council of Churches in 1990, I believe it was 1998, and just had a wonderful impactful time. That was my first time visiting the continent, and to see Zimbabwe and to see Black folk see us, there together, speaking our languages and not being impacted from a societal perspective in the ways that we've been impacted in America. Now, certainly colonialism has had just as many negative impacts on African people as as racism has had an impact on people in the diaspora. But there's a uniqueness and a wonderful quality of African people that colonialism couldn't even beat out of us or wipe out of us. And so that's what I want to be a part of. So Mutare, Zimbabwe, as I said, is where Africa University is. And so in visiting there my second time, I spent most of my time in Mutare and just fell in love with the city. It's a city of about 300,000 people. Africa University is doing awesome things on the continent. This is an institution started by the United Methodist Church about 27 years ago, I believe. And right now there are about 30 different African countries represented in the student body, and 92% of the students go back to the countries that they came from, and they have bridged the gap, because colonialism separated many of the African countries. They didn't have political connections or connections in terms of business and communication and trade in a lot of ways. I mean, you couldn't even, in some cases, fly from one country to the other. You had to fly to a European country, then fly back to the African country. Well, many of the students at Africa University have gone back to their countries, maintained those connections, and are a part of building more African unity and industry in so many profound ways. And of course, by the year 2050, the majority of Christianity will be African. And so Africa University, I think, will be a major, will play a major role in how Africa or how Christianity will be reshaped because of the African influence.
And there's a lot of historical, ancient stuff, in our history that's there in Zimbabwe.
Yes.
So it's wonderful, to be there, to feel Kemet, to feel the beginning of humankind.
Yes,
a lot of good stuff in Zimbabwe.
Absolutely.
Congratulations, man.
Thank you so much.
How is your Ndebele and Shona?
Neither are good. I've been saying that I wanted to find somebody to teach me Shona before I leave, but I think that's just gonna have to be something that happens when I get there. But you may already know that most of the people speak English there.
Sure.
In addition to the other languages. So in Africa University, English is actually the official language of Africa University. And so I didn't have a hard time either time when I visited Zimbabwe or any other countries that I visited in Africa, which is not many. I just visited Egypt and Zambia and had a little fly through in Ethiopia. But in all the places that I've been, I never had a problem with communication.
When you talk to the people in Zimbabwe, speaking English means that they understand you. But when you speak their language and say hello, what's happening, it's a whole different interaction.
Oh, really? I can imagine.
Yes. So the more Shona you learn, the better it's going to be. And there are a couple of other languages in Zimbabwe.
Right.
Major languages.
And I do intend to learn them, yes.
And they speak Swahili too.
Oh, really? I didn't know that.
Yes.
Okay, good.
You know, when I think of Zimbabwe and I think of those two major ethnic groups, so, you know, there was Joshua Nkomo, who was the Shona, and I believe Robert Mugabe spoke Ndebele. He probably spoke all the languages that are there.
Right.
And he was the most educated African leader, you know, because he had like 2 or 3 PhDs or something like that.
Yeah, he had quite a few degrees.
Yeah, yeah. I see Sister Judy has her hand up. Go ahead, Judy. And then Brother Katabasi.
I'm going to yield to Brother Katabasi. I'll come after him, if that's okay.
Yes.
Okay, Dr. Anyike, I wanted to ask you, you said you're headed to the African continent and that you are a Christian minister. Is your intention to present Christianity in a different way as you present it to the African people, or will you be the more traditional Christian missionary type minister on the continent?
Let's say the earlier, not the latter.
Okay.
And there are a lot of good things about Christian tradition that transcend the European impact of it. A lot of people don't know that for the first 300 years of Christianity, it was dominated by African impact.
Yes.
That's why I mentioned earlier, when you talk about the establishing of Christianity and the Jews themselves at that time, we talking about all Black folk. So a lot of people don't know that. But the development of Christianity, again, the catechetical school of Egypt, the starting of monasteries, first Christian church building, and most of the key theologians of early Christianity were African men. St. Augustine, Tertullian, Origen, Cyprian, and so many others. These were Black men who were born in Africa, many of them, and they had a profound impact on the early years of Christianity. So when we talk about tradition, you're really still talking about an African root. The impact of Constantine and other Europeans after him was almost not much, because the foundation had already been set by those African minds. So that's just really a separate thing apart from what I think you're really asking. My role in Africa will be the same as it's been here. I have been very clear about my Afro-Century commitments. And so what I've done in the United Methodist Church, here in Indiana in particular, has always been in the context of my African self and my African mind. And those who, at that time when I came here, Bishop Woody White and the cabinet understood that. I was quite clear on that. So, and I think that Bishop Woody White, who was an African American man, understood that and endorsed it and supported it in so many ways. And that's the reason why I've been able to prosper here, I think. So when I go to Zimbabwe, one of the things that impacted me when I last visited in 2014 is that I visited African University, and I was blessed to speak in a couple of the classes and to speak in the chapel. But in speaking in one class in particular, which was the English language class, I shared an approach to the nuances of our language using Black comedians. And somewhere in the midst of that, one of the Black comedians, one of the Black comedians mentioned something about Jesus and Jesus being Black. And so one of the students caught that and asked me about it. And that, of course, led to a conversation about, the Blackness of biblical folk and Jesus. And the students were shocked because they had not heard this conversation before. And every Black church, well, every church that I visited on the continent was Black. Every church that I visited on the continent, which is about 13 different churches, were all had white images of Jesus and biblical people. All of them. There was no exception.
Yeah.
And so to share in that class that Jesus was Black and the biblical people were Black, and then to give them some evidence, they were not hard to resist the evidence. I've met some Black folk here who you'd almost have to put a gun to their head to get them to understand and agree that Jesus is Black. But they were very open. Well, maybe it was because it was in an academic setting. I'm not sure, but they were very open to it. And so, that'll be a big part of what I do when I'm there with the presenting of this Afro-centric Bible and continuing what I do in terms of teaching our history and our culture, and certainly helping us to understand that the biblical people are Black folk. Those are the key things that you can expect from me when I'm in Zimbabwe. And
Excellent. And hopefully you will, you're leaving in August. I thought I heard you say August of this year.
Yes.
You will continue to maintain a link here with the Wosei community.
All right.
And kind of be an eye for us over there as to what's going on, and give us some regular insights into your work and, and what you're encountering and interacting with the people.
Thank you.
Maybe he could do a periodic thing on knowledge. But
Yeah.
also, so it could be once every 2 months, once you get settled over there.
Yeah.
Update us and everything.
Yes.
But I have a question too. Why since you're going to be living there? I'm sorry.
Can you hold your question? Because
Yes.
Judy had her hand up, and then
Yes, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
I have already asked the question. I still have one, but I'd like to yield and give Mama Afua a chance first.
Go ahead, Mama Afua.
It's just a quick question. I just want to know if you can, while you're living in Africa, pull together and publish something on all the African national holidays.
Oh, now that's a good idea, and that may happen. I'm as I said earlier, engaged in the work of this Bible that I'm doing, and I'll continue to publish other authors as I've been doing, here. So I may not get to that for a while, until 2023 or sometime, and maybe even beyond. My commitment is to be there for 4 years, and then by then evaluate if I want to spend the rest of my life there. But I can see that as something I would love to do, and I believe the resources in terms of the knowledge and the sources exists, that it won't be too hard, especially at African University when you got so many different countries represented in the student body. I bet that could be in fact, what I might just do is have each of them write their own, celebrations, and then, edit it and put it in a book. That's probably the easiest way for somebody like me to do it, who is just a baby and in making my connection to the continent by moving there.
Well, they have the African Union too, and they have a huge website, and each of the nations that are part of the Union will have all their holidays.
Ah, good. I didn't know that.
You can start there. Yeah.
Excellent.
But I think it would be a wonderful thing for us to have here. And if you could put it into a booklet or a publication, I'm certain it would sell.
Yes. And one of the things that I'm going to do, as I said earlier, we have a radio program I've been doing called Soul Liberation Radio, where we're going to change the focus. And we just did our last on-air show on the radio 2 Sundays ago. And at the beginning of April, we'll start off, we'll renew it again, the Soul Liberation Station on YouTube, Instagram, and Facebook. And we'll carry it right on over to the continent. And so we'll be bridging the gap using that vehicle when we get to the continent. And also we'll be hosting trips to various parts of the continent, especially Zimbabwe, over the next couple of years. So you can be listening for word of that also.
Keep in touch.
Right.
I sure want to get it. I want to get that information.
Right. Sister Judy, do you still have your question or your comment?
Yes, I'm going to be very quick because I know we have a meeting following this. I just wanted to say quickly, Dr. Anyike, I really like the idea of the way that you're going to approach Christianity. And I think that's really a way to help us to know ourselves better, because so many people are caught up, well, I won't say caught up, but follow, Christianity in the more traditional sense. Well, I won't say traditional either, but from the more European and not away from our natural selves and the way it originated. The other thing is, I noticed that, I don't know if he's still on, Kidi Awadu is on, and I met you and Kidi at the same time. Dr. Anyike, I don't know, I can't see you now, but are you still there?
Yes, he is. Yes.
Okay, I was gonna say, I don't know if you remember Kidi, the Conscious Rasta, because we were all around Atlanta at the same time, and I see him there. And the last thing was just, Minister Imhotep may already say this, but a lot of people join late, so you might want to show your books again before you leave.
I can do that. Again, African American Holidays is the one we've been focusing on tonight. It is a book that identifies our key celebrations, how they came to be, how to celebrate them. And it's still available. I mentioned earlier the website is populartruthpublishing.webs.com. If you just Google Popular Truth Publishing, you'll find it. You'll find the website very easily. And you can order the books there. And it is available on, Amazon and other places like that. The problem is you might not get the more recent publication or editions on these books. So it's probably good to get them directly from the company, but however you get it. Even the older versions are still good. The information is still meaningful and relevant to this day. This one, Historical Christianity, African-Centered, as I said, shows that the people of the Bible are Black folk. And it also shows that Christianity was institutionalized in Africa. And I say a lot more too about the changing, the transforming of Christianity from a more European influence to a more African influence. As I said, by 2050, Africa, or rather Africans, will make up the majority of Christians, something like 37% at that time. And that number will only get greater beyond 2050. And so this is something we need if we really want to understand the role of Black folk in Christianity, and understand that Christianity is not the white man's religion, but it's one that comes out of our culture. And then again, these other books that really come out of my doctoral work, but the purpose of the work is to find the ways to heal and develop relationships through shared values based on Black love, or based on systematic agapism. So one of the first book in the series, I like to consider it to be the first, is You're Gonna Be a Preacher, which is more autobiographical book. It shows or tells how I grew to love myself, my Blackness, love my Black people, and love my Black God, or I should say Black people, or Black heritage of Christianity, in the context of who God made me to be. So that's what the purpose of this book is, dealing with the issue of systematic agapism. And then The Faith to Love, again, finding the biblical and historical foundation for Black love. And then thirdly, Black love itself, where I offer some wonderful social perspectives, cultural perspectives, and practical approaches to how we can love one another and heal some of our relationships. We need our relationships healed from generation to generation. We need our relationship healed from male to female. We need our relationships healed in terms of the institutions that we should be supporting in the Black community, and learning to circulate the dollar in our community, and learning how to celebrate ourselves. And so in so many different ways, we need to be healed or find the proper shared values so that we can heal. And that's what we deal with in those books.
Mhm.
Well, this has been a real treat, Dr. Anyike. Thank you for taking us around the world.
Yes.
I didn't even know there were still Black people in Indiana. No, just kidding. I thought after the Jackson family left that, anyway, no, just kidding. But what a tremendous work. Was familiar with your holidays, your compositions on that, but the other works are great. And to hear that you're going to Zimbabwe is tremendous. It's great. We wish you much success, and we thank you for joining us. Again, could you put how to get your books in our chat? And of course, yeah, you can go on Amazon, but if you could put that in our chat, that would be great. And we can have that information to purchase your books. And after all this pandemic stuff goes, maybe before you travel to Zimbabwe, you'll make it to Northern California, and we could host you in person.
That would be wonderful.
Yes.
And I had heard of Wose community, but had never visited because we started something a few years ago called the Association of Afro-Century Christians. This is about 7 years ago. And so we did send some literature, some information to Wose about that effort. And that's something we won't give up. We just need to get our feet back on the continent, and then we'll also build up that particular network from the African and African American perspective, and maybe even beyond that, because I know that there are Afro-centric churches and ministries all across the country for sure, and maybe even around the world. We just got to hook up.
Yes, and in addition to Wose, there's also a strong Zimbabwe community here.
All right now, excellent.
All right, well, we're going to conclude now. We want to thank everyone for coming. We want to let you know next week we're going to be talking about the secrets of African sacred science by Dr. Chike Akua.
That's my brother.
That's your brother. Okay, am I saying his name correctly?
Yeah, Chike Akua.
Chike Akua is going to be our guest next week. We hope you can join us here at Black Knowledge Matters, 5 p.m. Pacific time, 8 in the East. Want to thank everyone for coming. Life, prosperity, and health. Live up.